So I'm just going to start the recording. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. I hope you are all great and good. My name is Chris M. Gordon. I'm CEO of the Irish Social Enterprise Network. We're delighted this morning to join with the Cork City Council, the Atlantic Social Lab programme to run a series of events and things hopefully of interest and of use to social enterprises in the Cork area. To that end, we bring in the experts and the big hitters. We're delighted this morning to bring in Caroline Egan. Some of you may already know Caroline, who is an expert in all things social enterprise, corporate governance, and a whole host of different areas. Caroline does a number of workshops across the country, and we're delighted that she's able to join us here today. If you think that this is anything to do with the Irish Social Enterprise Network, it's all to do with Julia Crowley. So anybody who's wishing to give any thanks or kudos towards this, it is all down to the great work that's been done for the past number of years in Cork, specifically with Juliet and her team. My whole goal here today is to give you an introduction to the Irish Social Enterprise Network and some of the options that we've got with the Cork Atlantic Lab, or the Atlantic Social Lab in Cork, and we're hoping to see that we might be able to get some assistance and help for you guys. So I'm just going to talk for the first minute or two before we introduce Caroline. So we're offering a number of supports. If you haven't checked them out already, it's www.socent.ie/Cork. We're running 2 webinars. This is the first of 2, Finance and Funding Your Social Enterprise in Uncertain Times. We also are doing a social impact and your social enterprise webinar as well towards the end of October. But the more important piece that we're trying to get involved in is these idea of clinics. We are working to try and do one-to-one calls with each and every one of you who would like to apply and receive that help and support, just to go through some issues that you might be dealing with. You're not alone. Pandemic COVID has affected us all, and it's just important that if we're able to catch up, it'd be nice to catch up one-to-one, so we'll be able to give you more information about that. If you want to register for those clinics, though, it's socent.ie/Cork. We'd run a number of other local networks, and we're interested in running one for Cork. So we might be able to see if there's something we can do in the near future. If that's of interest, please do tell us. If it's not, please do tell us. We want to make sure that your time is not wasted. We want to make sure that you get everything that you know. We also want to make sure that you learn something new every time you're on. And so that's real important to us. So this is one that we're running next Thursday, the 17th September with UKD. We also run a Twitter hour, SoCent IRL, which happens every Wednesday night at 9 to 10. It's an opportunity, if you have a Twitter account and you haven't used it, if it's something that you think would be of interest. It's funny that we trend every week. There's probably literally nothing else on a Wednesday at 9 o'clock, but we trend, so that's quite good. If anybody wants to learn more about a community, we take topics of interest every Wednesday. We'll be able to talk to you on there. Just use the hashtag SoCentIRL. Also, you might have noticed the BiSocial hashtag. We have a directory of BiSocial initiatives all across the country. We've got really good news on this. We've got support to be able to develop the BiSocial directory more. And so if you're not on the directory, the question is, why not? This will be a huge port of call for social enterprises in the very, very near future. A couple of last things. Please keep your microphone on mute just for the webinars. If you have any questions, please add them in the chat feature. We do check-ins, but this is more of a webinar and it's currently being recorded. What I'd like to do, though, if you wouldn't mind, if you'd please put in, while you're on the call, in the chat feature, your name and the organization that you're involved in. That might be a really good start, just to introduce each other. We are being recorded today, and so we are hoping that you will be able to pick up on anything that you might have missed. But if you have any questions, we'll be taking Q&A at the end of it through the chat feature. So please do add any questions that are here today. Also, this is a flavor of some of the supports that we might be able to offer. And so for you guys, hopefully it will be of benefit. But without further ado, I'm going to introduce our first, our speaker for today, ladies and gentlemen. Julia Crowley, are you there? Can you come in?
Okay, hi Chris.
There you go, excellent. Juliet, or sorry, Caroline. Did I just call you Juliet? I've just messed it up now.
You're okay, Chris.
Juliet, what did I do? I have. You know what?
You're fine, Chris. Don't worry. You're fine.
You know, I've just discovered as well, I have editing privileges of this video that we're recording. This is not going to happen. Just start pick it up where we started. We'll be grand. Caroline, I'm so sorry. Caroline, would you please introduce yourself? Tell us who you are. And I believe you're the one with the presentation. So hopefully all of this will happen at once.
Happy days, Chris. Yeah, presentation is up here now, so we're going to be good to go in a few minutes. I'm delighted to be able to join you this morning. I work in a company called CramdenTECH, which we founded in 2013. We're based in Shannon, County Clare, but we work with organisations all over the country. And as Chris said, we spend a lot of our time working with social enterprises, both large and small, startup, well-established. And I hope that what you find through the session this morning is a certain, I suppose, insight into what maybe we need to be looking at now, given the times that we're in. So whereas I appreciate that we are all in very uncertain times between COVID-19 and the fallout from Brexit potentially in January, it could seem to be a very negative time. What I'd like us to do, though, is to maybe focus on the priorities and what we can do to help get the ship steered in the direction that it needs to. So over the next number of minutes, what I'd like to do with you is maybe just sow some seeds of what could be done, and also maybe give you some insight into why I think it might be valuable. So under all this plenty of grey hair, I've been involved in business development and management for several decades now at this point. And I suppose I've learned a few things over the years, and one of the most important lessons I learned was that when I started out, the very first position that I got professionally, I was made redundant. So either I wasn't very effective in the role, or at that particular time, it was an organisation that found itself in financial difficulties, and there was reasons why that would be the case. So again, you know, part of life is about learning. And I was very conscious of what the lessons were to be learned from this, from an enterprise getting started, evolving, and what it needed to do to try and ensure that scenario wouldn't happen again. So whereas I'm very conscious of the fact that as social enterprises, the emphasis is on helping you to achieve your social impact, but we're also running enterprises at the end of the day. And so we also have to be mindful of what needs to be done to keep them solvent and to keep them on the road, irrespective of what's happening in our external environment. So, sorry, Chris, yeah.
Well, that's brilliant. I'm going to invite you, so just to tell everybody, it's about 15 minutes, and so chat afterwards, and I know it'll give you a little bit of time to bring up the screen there. The other thing that we have is that if anybody has any difficulties with issues, we will be more than happy to be solutions focused, and you're available afterwards to chat too. So anybody, but take it away, Carol.
Absolutely, thanks, Chris. So in terms of this, there's two elements that we're going to look at this morning. One is the whole area of finance, and the other is funding. So as I say, I want to just plant a few seeds in your mind, because I'm conscious of the fact when we're looking at our financial projections over the coming year, even to year end, there may be an emphasis on cutting costs. And one of the dangers, if we just arbitrarily and crudely say, well, we're going to cut our costs by 10% or by 15%, straight away we're having to consider what the implications of that might be for our overall purpose and impact. So I'm going to go back to an old idea to begin with, and that before we start making any decisions on where those cuts may have to happen, if that's the route that you're taking, go back and take a look at your value chain. So in other words, you're breaking down everything you do into discrete activities, and each of those activities in turn are leading to a service or a product or a support into your wider community, into your beneficiaries. And as a social enterprise, hopefully you have structured and configured your operations so that you're generating a surplus or a margin that enables you to continue. So for each of these activities then, what you're trying to do is to identify the costs associated with each. And so we've got our primary activities, as you know, all the way from what we have to do from an inputs point of view to delivering the service, and then all of the support activities that are important, from the way in which we engage with purchasing, the discussions we have with our suppliers, through to the way in which we get information as we need it. So when we talk about technology development, it will be critical for boards and for managers to be able to obtain the information they need in real time. So all of us are looking again at what that entails. And what I'm suggesting to some of the groups that I work with is that all of you are going to need a financial dashboard, a nice, fast, simple summary of where your organisation is at that you can generate at any given time. And that means that the boards then have it within their means to identify where their cash position is, what's driving the cost, and aligning that with the services that are happening. So if I were to give you one suggestion arising from this morning, look again at the way in which you are managing information around your finances to ensure that you can generate that dashboard at the click of a button, basically, that you can generate it as a report. All of us are looking at human resource management, be that in terms of our staff that we may be employing through work placement schemes, or that may be allocated to us through other schemes where we're host organisations, through to utilising our volunteer base, and also looking at the implications of employing staff around what it is we do. So HR there certainly will be, I'm guessing, strains on human resource management, because typically when you go into recessionary situations, we saw in 2008 that the deeper the recession, the more demand there is on organisations providing social supports and benefits as social enterprises do. And obviously in terms of support activities, then we're also looking at management, at planning, not to mind the actual infrastructure itself. So as I said, before you take a decision to start arbitrarily cutting costs across the board, if you find yourself in a difficult funding situation, go first to your value chain, pop it down on a sheet of paper and start looking at the implications for you and where costs are arising. So that's one approach you might take that goes back several years. But I am conscious of the fact that you're social enterprises, and we could spend a lot of time discussing the fact that as enterprises, there's a greater good, that there's a social end that you're trying to achieve. So aligned with the concept of the value chain, I get you considering then what can be learned from the world of costing and management accounting. Now, for me, I'm a little bit of a nerd. Chris will know that anyway, from knowing me over the years. And so, various techniques and tools interest me. But way back when, I had a decision to take, and that was either to become a management accountant or to go down the marketing route. And management accountancy has always struck me as an area that we need to shine a much greater light on in organisations. So what I'm going to suggest to you this morning is that if the value chain model doesn't naturally sit with the way you operate, because you don't produce a product in the way it would be conventionally thought of in the commercial world, then perhaps the route to take is to go back to your theory of change. So look again at the overall social impact that you're trying to achieve, and then start at the basics. So look at the type of inputs that you have at your disposal, and that'll be everything from the revenue available to you to every other type of input that you use. And very importantly, start costing your activities. And those activities in turn, as you know, lead to a certain set of outputs which you are then using to demonstrate you're achieving your outcomes, the difference that you're making, and your overall social impact. So rather than having an arbitrary approach where you're cutting cost across the board by 10 or 15%, what you're actually doing now is you are costing all of these activities, and you're saying to yourselves, which of our activities are directly enabling us to achieve our social impact? They're achieving the outputs that we need to make all of this happen. And that is then giving you an opportunity to cost accordingly. So it's an interesting exercise to engage in. Let me give you a practical example just for a quick minute on that. If in the doing of this, you are running a community centre and you are hiring out meeting rooms, and then maybe you have other funded services that you're delivering as well, and you're looking to try and put an actual cost on what it actually costs you to provide a meeting room for an hour. I would expect all of you in the times that we're now in to be able to give a cost on that. So if you hire out your meeting room for 20 euros an hour, you should be able to say that that meeting room actually costs us 10 euros or 12 euros, as the case might be. You should be able to put a quantifiable figure on that, so that when you're quoting the cost to the client who's hiring the meeting room from you, you can see where your margin is. And it's an interesting exercise actually when you start costing all of your activities, because now you start seeing where cost is being driven. And it also forces you then to look at how the overheads are being allocated across the different activities. So it's showing you very clearly where the margin is being generated and where it's not. And that level of insight makes it that little bit easier for boards to make decisions then on where the axe needs to fall, if it's a cost-cutting measure that we need to engage in. And therefore, as I say, I don't ever want to take away from the fact that you are trying to generate a social impact to support the beneficiaries that you're set up to engage with. So I think that perhaps this type of model for some of your social enterprises might be a more intuitively effective way of getting a handle on the costs, and as a result of that then enabling you to put budgets in place that will keep the ship on the waters as needs be. A few other thoughts then for you around the finance aspect. Many of you will have heard of this concept before, zero-based budgeting. It's much beloved by boards everywhere, and what it's in effect doing is saying that instead of trying to budget incrementally, where we say we're spending 5,000 euros on our energy bills a year and we're budgeting to spend perhaps 5,500 this year based on the way inflation works and so forth. With zero-based budgeting, we go back to zero, and we're saying we're spending zero on energy now, but we have to justify every expenditure we have. So many of us are going back to this approach. And again, if you have properly costed all of your activities, it makes it much easier for you to engage in this type of concept. So for every single expenditure, for every line item that you have in a budget, you justify it on the basis of the type of activities and your need. And again, if you align it with your impact, it should justify then what is required. The other area we're all having to look at is scenario planning. Now, you're probably doing this intuitively. So you will have a plan A, B, and C. I mean, plan A is to try and grow. And the reality is that despite the fact we are now in a recession, some organizations will still be able to grow because of the nature of what they do and the funding model that underpins their social enterprise. Other organizations will not be in that fortunate position. So some organizations, planning and scenarios will see them growing to a certain degree. Others at plan B will be maintaining the status quo if they can, with potential some cutbacks on costs, but being able to continue after. And in other situations in plan C, boards and management may be having to look at to reduce the extent or scope of the activities that they engage in, or the volume of beneficiaries that they're supporting. So what we're all having to do, particularly with the coming year and the uncertainty that exists out there, is putting together our cash flow scenarios and cash flow positions based on these different scenarios as you find them. And in some of your instances, if you are social enterprises that are focused on a particular geographical area that you are thinking of expanding outwards, again, your cash flow scenarios may revolve around that. If you were to expand services into different areas, what would the implications be for you? But before we can put any kind of meaningful budgets or cash flow projections in place, we first have to have a very clear handle on the costs in our organization. And if you go that management or costing route and you have a very clear sense of what's driving activity cost, I think it'll ensure that your budgets are at least realistic. And I suppose in terms of realistic budgets, I'm going to pop in payment terms here, because in your social enterprise, you will be generating a degree of traded income. And as a result of that, it's suggesting then that you have clients and customers that are paying for services. So if you're not doing this already, it is really helpful for you to have some system in place where you can track payment of invoices. So you'll all have given your clients a certain amount of payment terms, by whether it's to pay their invoices within 2 weeks or a month or whatever the case might be. And so bearing in mind that many of us are limited in the amount of HR time that we can spend on the accounting function, you might be making a decision to put automated reminders in place. It's astonishing how helpful that can be, that you will have a statement of account going out at the end of the month, reminding your clients just to settle the bills if needs be. So that the last thing you want to have happen to you is that in effect you're funding your clients, because the longer it takes them to pay their invoices, you're if you like, subsidizing them while that's occurring, and you may not be able to do that. You in turn have bills that you have to pay for your suppliers. So many of us are looking again at this whole area on the lead time between us paying our suppliers and our customers in turn paying us. So that might be just something that would be worth looking at. So from the finance point of view, I think it's actually this, for me as social enterprises, is likely to be the most important point this morning coming through, that if you can take a management accounting approach rather than a financial accounting approach to trying to cost your products and your services that you're putting out there into the market. And then if you're trying to reduce cost, pare away those activities that have or add less value to your ability to achieve your overall outcomes and social impact. And that might be a more viable approach to take, because when we're planning for the coming year, it isn't just for 2021. We're also setting ourselves up from a strategic point of view and from an operational configuration point of view for what comes down the tracks in the next number of years. So that's on the finance side, just some thoughts for you this morning to consider. We're going to take a quick look on the funding side as well now. You know, I've no doubt whatsoever that as enterprises, you're looking at all of the funding opportunities that are out there to support you. So I just maybe want to focus in on a couple of them this morning, if I may. If you're in the fortunate position that you have a bank that extends an overdraft facility to you, that might be a means to keep you going from a cash flow point of view. So as you know, we need different types of funding in an organization. Capital funding, which oftentimes might be that little bit easier to get through funding applications. And we also need our operational capital as well. But for some of us, we have an opportunity to, if we can, to put an overdraft facility at bank level that it ensures then that, you know, we have the funds as and when we need them. Overdraft facilities are easier to obtain when you can demonstrate to a bank, obviously, that there is a pattern in income coming into your operation to sustain the overdraft itself. Some of us are looking instead at taking out short or medium term loans, and that might be an option depending again on the funding model that you have. So the two primary routes that many of us are looking at are to go towards social finance, such as Community Finance Ireland or Clancredo, or possibly the local credit union. We forget that as cooperatives in their own right, that they're there to provide support to us as well. So it might be worth looking at the options that you have available. I'm going to just skip down to the use of reserves, in that in an ideal scenario, all organisations should have a cash reserve that is available as and when it's needed. And I appreciate that not all organisations are in the fortunate position they've been able to put this in place. But for the time being, some organisations don't have to worry about taking out overdrafts or relying on loan finance, because they have access to a reserve that has been built up over the last number of years. So if you're in that position, that'll tide you over as needs be. However, a board will have to make a decision to what level will they spend reserves and at what point is the cutoff point, because a reserve is also there to protect you in various circumstances. There's a reason a reserve is in place, and a reserves policy. What I'd like to take the last few minutes on this morning, getting you to think about then, is there any further opportunity for you to generate more revenue from potentially corporate support, and if so, how might you consider pitching for that support? And we might also take a quick look at some of the things to consider when you're putting a funding application in place. Because I find that there are certain common reasons why funding applications don't always get the level of support that an organisation might expect. So it's no harm maybe just to take a look at some of the reasons why that is the case. Now, in terms of pitching for corporate support, we know that there are corporates out there for whom this period of uncertainty around COVID-19 and what's coming down the tracks potentially with a hard Brexit, that for them, this is not going to be as serious an issue because of the nature of the work that they do, or again, that they can buffer it and they can sustain it. So corporates out there are prepared oftentimes to support good causes with financial contributions or other kinds of support. So if it's a case that you've identified an organisation that actually is prepared to provide hard cash as a corporate donation, you've got to think about the way you're going to pitch to them. And really what we can do here is learn the lessons from the Dragon's Den. So you've all seen an episode, I'm sure, of that every now and again. And you've looked at the potential entrepreneur as they walk up the steps and they're interviewed and they're full of confidence, and you hear their product or their idea or their service, and you're saying to yourself, oh, that's a winner. Absolutely, they're going to get funded. And then you see them walking back down the steps and you're kind of bewildered what happened there when they didn't get the funding. So what do we learn from this that we can put to good use if you get the opportunity to sit in front of a corporate social responsibility manager, or you're having a conversation at a network meeting with a managing director who has access to the cash? So 3 things always to remember that needs to come through in your pitch. The first is that a corporate funder is investing in the people in the organization. So in other words, there is something about you and the passion that you bring to what it is you're doing, and that collective experience that sits around the board table or is evident in the management team that you've put together. People invest in people, because at the end of the day, no matter how great the idea is behind your social enterprise, no matter how passionately you talk about it, you've got to be able to deliver on what you're promising. So there's an expectation you're creating in their minds. So remember that when you're pitching, think about it from their perspective. They want to back a winner. And the only thing that they can judge this on, if you don't already have a track record, is what have you done in your past that they can use as an indicator of success. The second thing then that you need to consider as well, bearing that in mind, that success follows success. Take a lead from the type of communication strategy that Barack Obama delivered while he was president, and actually right from his days when he was a community organizer in Chicago. So provide the corporate with change they can believe in. So the lovely little slogan now that you have going there, but it's worth remembering. So again, one of the huge advantages you have as a social enterprise is that not alone have you got that enterprise side of professionalism to what you do, but you also have a social impact. So I know you'll be looking at that again, but it's worth considering that corporates like to be able to invest in enterprises where there's a clear outcome and benefit that can be seen. So don't be afraid to sell the impact that you're achieving as well. Give them change and impact that they can believe in and get behind and support. And then last but not least, really critical, you would be amazed at the amount of people that get time to sit in front of a corporate social responsibility manager and they don't give due thought to this last point. So you've got to be clear as to what you actually need the money for. Don't go in the door and say, oh, we've got a shortfall of 20,000 in our finances, can you help us out? You're going to be lucky if you get anything with that statement. So you need to be able to tell them what you're going to be to spend the money on, why you need it now. That's critical. You're not going in there looking for a promise. You have to tell them why you need the money now, and very importantly, why can you be trusted to spend it? Now, to be honest with you, in the corporate, in the social enterprise world, you have an advantage here in that if you're aligning yourself with the Charities Governance Code, you actually now have almost like a quality mark that you're bringing to the equation as well, because you're saying we've got really good corporate governance, and that corporate governance is focusing on the sustainability of the organization. For those of you that are not charities, don't worry about it. You can align yourself with the standards in the Charities Governance Code, because it isn't just about finance, it's also about sustainability. It gets you looking at it in the round. So if you haven't had the time to look through the standards just yet, that might be another tip from this morning. So the last topic then, or the last seed, I'll put it that way, that I'm putting out there this morning, is just getting you again to think about some of the reasons why funding applications don't always get the support that's required. And one of the most important things you need to look at is your needs statement. Now, there's almost like an art form in this, but when you put a needs statement in place, straight off the bat, whoever is reading this needs to be able to see, this is the problem or need in the community, this is the solution that's being put in place. This group of people have thoroughly thought through what it is they're delivering on, and clearly there's a sustainable need there, and also it's something that we as funders should care about. So they've thought about the alignment of the two. A need statement's a critical document, and the more time you can put into that, the better. So again, just aligned to that, then you make sure that the way the funding applications are articulated is that there's a very clear, meaningful, practical evidence solution to the type of need that you're trying to bring across. So social impact comes through there time and again as well. Ideally, you should be able to demonstrate your experience or ability to put that solution in place by virtue of the way you're describing the need and describing the solution. So whether or not you have an opportunity to put bios in of all of the key players on your side, be they board members or be they management, it's actually the way the need statement is written. It's the type of referencing that you've used, it's where you've gone out to do your research. All of that becomes evident in the need statement. It's that critical part of a funding application. So we should be able to see that you have the ability to deliver what you're going to promise to the group out there. And I suppose aligned with that as well, don't ever put a funding application in place and start writing it the night before. Now, I'm sure none of you have ever done that. And I suppose for very short funding applications, and when you're very experienced in doing this, you know, they can be put together quickly because the focus of the funding is typically quite narrow. There's a certain number of items you can get funded for, and that's that. But the idea behind doing the research is that it's giving you an opportunity to consult with Dr. Google. And so you're seeing what other organizations have done out there. You're seeing what some of the trends might be. And it's amazing what you can pick up on that others have done and just be inspired by that as well and have that come through. The other thing that I would just suggest to you is that if you haven't looked at them before and you're looking for some really good quality demographic data that you can pull down a number crunch quickly, Pubble Maps is freely available for you. So they've gone and they've analysed the census data from the last 3 census. And again, you can generate an Excel spreadsheet as a report, and there's some really good information in there. So if you give yourself the time to do the research, it's amazing what's out there that you can use to back up your case. And again, you've got a lot of people who are doing tons of research, possibly in the area that you're in, so you can then draw down and make reference to these academic studies, which is backing up what you're doing to great effect. 2 final points then for you on this, and I suppose this is a critical one as well, that a funder doesn't want to see funding applications for the sake of it. So just because it's out there doesn't mean you're going to apply for the cash. When you apply for a grant, it's because you're looking for support in turn of your business plan or of the action plan or the strategic plan that you're trying to deliver on. So sometimes a funder might even look for a copy of it, or they may check if you're online, they might actually go back and have a double check to see what your mission and objectives are. So just make sure it's very much aligned with that. And I suppose the other thing to be clear in your minds about then as well is that there are certain things a funder will and will not fund, and typically they will tell you that in the priorities that they set out in the funding application. Just make sure that it is clear. If you are looking for argument's sake, if you're looking for 20,000, you need 20,000 for a project, but you know that the funder will not fund salaries, and salaries makes up 10,000 to that. When you put the budget in with your funding application, you separate out the costs so they can then see what they could fund. Whereas if you just look for 20,000 and you don't break it down properly, straight away you've discounted yourself, because you've got items in there that cannot be funded under the funding round. So it's little things like that can cause issues for groups out there. Now that, forgive me, is the whistle-stop tour of some thoughts for you, some seeds that we're sowing this morning in terms of what may or may not be helpful to us over the next while. So there you go, Chris. Have I done that on time for you?
It's as ever. And you know, I give you all the hardest tasks. Caroline, it's kind of like, tell us about uncertain times and find funding and finance, and you always give us things. There's two things that I always find from these sessions. One of them is that you learn stuff that you already know, which is brilliant, or sometimes you learn something that you didn't know, and it's quite good to be able to get some updates on that. Caroline, I'm going to keep you on there because we're going to ask some questions, and anybody, please do check out CramdenTECH. They have incredible website for skills development and everything around corporate governance, and Caroline's always doing e-learning, great programs including WordPass and Build Future Skills, so do check out those other things. Please do ask some questions in the chat box, but for now I'm going to ask everybody a little bit of a question. How prepared do you feel you are for the coming 6 to 12 months? So one of the challenges that I think we're all going to face is that there's a certain unknown, and we're all kind of feeling like we need to get more prepared in doing so. And so we're trying to maybe hold on to issues or things that we think might be able to help us. So that is absolutely normal and to be expected. While that poll is going on, please do fill it out if you would. I can close the poll just in a minute or two. Thanks for introducing yourself, anybody who's on the call. We're going to talk a little bit later about other supports that we've got for Cork as well, so please do stay on for that. And yes, we will be sending out the presentation afterwards, and Caroline, I'm sure, will be free to be able to answer the odd phone call or two if people want to email or so. You've always been incredibly responsive. Tony, it's been a while since I've seen you because over the months, but I'm going to let you, I'm going to ask your question if that's okay. So you are looking for, this is good time in your CFO, help build the survive and thrive financial plan during the downturn. But Caroline, financial dashboard, you mentioned it in the presentation, so that the board have a clear picture of where they are to be able to help make decisions. Any recommendations?
Yeah, I suppose the key data, Tony, that they're looking for from this is to not have to go and pore over the financial statements, because as we know, not every board member comes from a financial background. And so in talking to board members over the last number of years, when I've asked them this question, what do you actually need in this dashboard? What I'm being told time and again is, we want to know what our cash position is. So cash inflows, cash outflows during the reporting period, what's the bottom line? So did we make a surplus, did we make a deficit, and what is the implication on our reserves? That's the first piece of information they need to see coming through. The second thing that they're looking for is a meaningful breakdown on the expenditure and the revenue coming in. So again, like that, from a costing point of view, telling them that we spent X amount of money on salaries and on the heating bill and so forth, without telling them how that was apportioned across the different services. Just very quickly, they want to see which services and supports are contributing to the margin and which are running at a deficit. So it's presenting them the information in that way. And the third aspect that they look for on this is, ideally, all of us would have had a cash flow projection, all of us would have a budget that we are working towards. So they want to see what were the actual targets for the reporting period, what were the actuals, and where's the variance. So if you like, there's 3 sections in there that they're looking for, and that gives them an overview. Very quickly they can see what's happening. And I suppose the last thing I'd say, Tony, is if you can use the traffic light system on these, so that if you're on track, you're on green. If you have a little bit of a worry, it's amber, and if it's red, the board have the conversation. It avoids then meaningless conversations discussing what's going well, because you know your board is a limited amount of time at a board meeting, so you got to make it count for you. So that's the whistle stop tour on that one.
That is really good. And I suppose for help and advice on that, most people have an accountant or somebody else that they have to bounce these things off. In some cases, you might have an auditor. And so really having management accounts, I presume most people have now gone online with their accountancy software as well. And so it's even easier to be able to just publish a report. But it's about giving the directors the information that they need, so that they're not asking for it and then causing more tension. It's about giving everything that they need specifically and then backing it up when they need. The traffic light system is excellent. I'm just going to close this poll here. I would love to think we were prepared and very prepared. I think everybody's on the same path here, somewhat prepared and not prepared. We feel you. So anybody who has thoughts on that, please do add them to the chat box. I have a couple of things which has just struck me going through the presentation there. Caroline, keep it simple, stupid. The idea of like, we are constantly in this battle of the important and the urgent and all those things that come along, particularly now when an awful lot of social enterprise managers quickly close down services. And as I say, oftentimes they close the front door and they open the back door. They continue to work and expand services, but they didn't do it by being able to increase revenue. And so an awful lot of social enterprises are struggling at the moment because of a 1 in 100 year pandemic out of the blue. But the things are really important to strike me, which is like, why do you exist? And are you fulfilling that mission? And if you tell that story through and you're honest with yourself and you take not just the good stuff that you do, but don't ignore the bad stuff that may come along as repercussion or as an effect of what you do. And it really struck me in the presentation there, the finance comes from that. And so keep it simple. But you are my most favorite nerd. I don't know why I wrote down nerd when I was listening to you, but there's something about the detail, Caroline, that really does make the difference, and you guys have been doing it for so long. So I'm just asking is there anybody got any questions for Caroline? Please do share them. I have one other question that I've got for you guys. But for some reason I can't share it. It'll be good. We are sending out the presentations afterwards. So if there aren't any final questions, Caroline, is there any kind of, Tony maybe have a question.
Thank you, Chris. Caroline, I'm just wondering if we were to look for a CFO to help build us a plan through this downturn, is that something that you guys do?
We don't, I'm afraid. No, we well, a lot of services that we delivered, that wouldn't be one of them though. Apologies.
Where would you start?
I suppose if you're going to tender for it, that might be a route to take. Or the other thing that you might do, Tony, is one of the advantages of the social enterprise network is talk to some of the other social enterprises and see who they would recommend. Because again, you're going to get somebody who understands what social enterprise is about. And I think that'll be important for this particular role.
Yeah, thank you.
Tony, did you say is that a paid position?
Pardon?
It's a paid position, a CFO.
I suppose it could be temporary, sort of to help build the plan, or maybe it's a retired CFO who's interested in giving something back. I'm not looking for something free, if you know what I mean, but maybe there's something we can do in return for it.
No, sure. And I'm just wondering if there's money involved, because the ACCA, for anybody who doesn't already know, they do have a network of accountants that are able to freely give of the time. Now, to be frank, it's been 9 months, a year since I've heard of anything that's going on. But if you contact the ACCA Ireland, which is an accountancy body, representative body in Ireland, one of 4 or 5, they do have a list of accountants that are able to assist. I also know that coming into the end of the tax year in August or October as well is a bit tricky. So having accountants at this time of year given freely of time when they might not have it might not necessarily be the best. But do check out ACCA. I'll try and see.
My fear, Chris, would be, in an accountant and a CFO, my fear would be accountants are telling me, don't spend the money. But a CFO might be able to say, here's the best value, where to spend that money,
Yeah, that I hear you. I feel your pain, and I'm sure other people on the call are having the same issue as well. You might see it as an opportunity to invest, but the prudent thing might be to downsize when in fact maybe now's the opportunity to do something else. It's a tricky situation, something that needs to be done. ACCA might be a good one. We can put a call out as well. Do check out the Twitter hour. And the last thing is, if anybody has any recommendations, I suppose it doesn't really matter where in the country they are able to probably help you because the pandemic has probably limited everybody's reach over the last few while. So you might have more options than you would have had it not been in this situation. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much, Tony. I'm more than happy to follow up on that. Talking about following up, Caroline, any last things that you have? I am going to tell people the current supports that we're offering through the Atlantic Social Lab, but just before we do that, any final words of wisdom, pointing people in the right direction?
Yeah. All I would say is try not to be too down and negative about it, because you know we've come through recessions before. I know this is a challenge like none of us have seen in our lifetimes, and we've got other things happening out there. But I always believe that if you focus on the good that you're doing, the reason why you were set up is to support beneficiaries. I think if you focus on that, it'll give you the energy. So be kind to yourselves, because you have to practice self-care in all of this as well. You've got a lot of strain on your shoulders, so don't feel guilty for taking that little bit of time out for yourselves as well. Try and stay positive and focus on the impact of what you're achieving. I would say that to anyone, Chris. You know, that's will get us over this.
You're right. You are not alone. And so if anybody has any difficulties, we fully understand, but we are here to be able to help offer some supports and give whatever we can to be able to do that. To talk about that, thank you very much, Caroline. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to tell everybody, I don't know what I'm sharing now. I'm just going to tell everybody about some of the supports that have been given through the Cork Atlantic Lab. So the Atlantic Social Lab and Cork City Council. And so I'm just about to share the screen. Today was one of 2 webinars. We are doing an additional webinar. Those of you that have been involved in the Atlantic Social Lab know that we have offered a number of other services over the past few while. One of them was with Quality Matters, and we have done a piece of work with that. We will continue to offer those type of things. It's a constant thing, and obviously you heard about it from Caroline here today. But there are other supports that are available. We are offering clinics. What are clinics? It's an opportunity to speak to us for half hour, 45 minutes, just to go through any issues that you have. We have 15 places only for that. And so what we want to do is we want to see if you can register your interest. If you think it might be worthwhile talking through some issues, please do just drop your email and your phone number. We'll be able to get back in touch with you. Juliet might be a point of call for this. So if you want, please do contact Juliet or contact us at info@socent.ie or register on socent.ie/Cork. For the clinics, we just want to be able to listen to some of the challenges that you're facing. And as ever, we're not pretending that we know the answer or that we're able to give the magic beans that are needed, but we are able to point you in the right direction to get some supports. We haven't been stumped yet, so there's always something that we can learn. So hopefully that will be of value. The other thing is we can offer other supports. Please do check out the SoCent IRL Twitter Hour. We run webinars and we run check-ins every fortnight, one every other week. So please do consider doing that. But for us from now, thank you so much for taking part today. We will follow up with this with an email for the details of the presentation that Caroline gave today and how to get access to some of the supports that we're able to provide. So thank you very much for today. We will let you go. You've been so attentive. We really appreciate it. Thanks to Caroline and to Juliet, and have a great Friday.
Okay, bye for now.
Take care.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, guys.